Are you a business owner struggling to manage cash flow or unsure which financial metrics truly drive growth? In this episode, Tom Dillon, CFA and founder of Frac Finance, reveals how small and medium sized businesses can master their numbers to fuel sustainable success. You'll discover how to identify the KPIs that matter, avoid costly financial pitfalls, and leverage strategic planning to scale with confidence. If you want actionable steps to strengthen your company's financial foundation, you don't want to miss this conversation.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
So, Tom, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I am excited to have you here too. Of course, I love finance and we do bookkeeping for clients too and know how important financial information is. But a lot of entrepreneurs don't even take the time to look at their numbers on a regular basis. So I would love for you first to even explain, why is this a mistake?
Well, I would, if I could use an analogy, which I think can be helpful. It's probably not the best one, but think of it this way. If you're driving in a car with your finance accounting team, you have the people looking out the windshield trying to navigate, but at times you really need to understand where you've been. And so that's really the rear view and looking at the bookkeeping, while the people inside the car are helping change the tires, keep the oil going, fill up the car, have gas in it, make sure you can see out the windshield, etc. That's kind of the whole entire finance accounting department. And so the problem is in an analogy, this is kind of where it breaks down a little bit. But with the rear view, you really need to understand where you're going because that's your map. And without it, you don't know where you're going in terms of looking out the windshield. You're kind of moving aimlessly. So it's really that grounding GPS center point that really helps navigate you in the future. So that's why it's so important.
I agree. I mean, it's great to have information for, what you've done in the past, but you want to really be using that to make strategic decisions, right? And making those changes going forward, which is why I'm excited we're chatting today. So you can explain some of the information because people may just be confused and not really understand all of the differences and what all the numbers mean. But I would love for you first to even talk about cash flow management. Why is that so important for people to pay attention to? Obviously, it's critical to being able to run the business, but a lot of times people are focused just on profit. So I would love for you maybe to talk about that.
Yeah, not a problem. And so that really all starts, though, with clean accounting. So the reason behind clean books, as Candy, will pound the table on night and day, is you don't have good, accurate cash flow without clean books. And so it really starts with a good chart of account. And so if you don't have good chart of accounts, you are really going to be miscategorizing a lot of information with regards to the visibility and the reporting around a lot of those strategic decisions you mentioned. And then additionally, moving more so to the clean books, that's going to really help provide that insight in making sure that we're going to be able to do good cash management. And that really revolves around what the working capital is in the business that's required to run it. Going back, we'll stick to this car analogy. Let's say you were to go buy a business. You go and buy a business. Well, let's just say that this is a car. You go to a car and you're going to buy an asset. It's the business, right? And you have to get it home. What if there's no gas in it? How are you going to get it home? How are you going to operate the car? It's not going to go anywhere. So you're buying a business that's not going to go anywhere. Why? There's no gas in it. So you're going to have to then get a line of credit or get cash or infuse your own cash into the business to get it to actually move. Okay, so when you go and buy a business, that's similar with regards to the gas in the car is your working capital. It's the amount of cash, the gas needed to get everything to move and run. so you can get somewhere, so you could grow your business. Similarly, that's the same thing in the way in which that Candy's speaking to the cash management side of the business. It's
Mhm.
knowing how much cash is on hand, not just, hey, can we meet payroll like most business owners want to talk about? Can I make payroll? I mean, the amount of stories that I've had where people are putting payroll on a credit card and they don't have a good understanding of why and what happened. Last month was so good. Our sales were better this month. What's going on? Well, a lot of that has to do with what amount of money is being allocated to growing the business or a new
Mhm.
hire. So you're going to have marketing dollar allocation. You could have human capital resource allocation where you're bringing on a new hire. Um, and so those aspects are going to change the amount of cash that you really need to operate the business on a daily in order to meet payroll, pay your vendors, suppliers, etc. And
Mhm.
so that's, the big picture of why this matters. And
Mhm.
what we really like to think about, we're more growth oriented CFOs, not cost cutting CFOs. So we really look at it from a marketing and sales perspective. How much cash can we invest back into the business to grow this? And that's what we really like. Now, that's again the high level. The
Mhm.
nuances of how do you do it? A lot of times people do it with 13-week cash flow models. So you can build out 13-week cash flow models. You can look at your AP, your accounts payable, your accounts receivable, those pesky little customers that just choose not to pay on time that are historically late. All right, let's shift that over a week or a few days. You start to get a sense of what the puts and takes are with regards to your specific cash situation with the inflows and outflows of your business. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of a tool that's utilized in order to manage that cash. And then the big picture reason for us is we don't want to cut costs. The people and resources you have in your business are there for a reason. They're needed to grow. And so for us, we really look more of an abundance mindset, not scarcity, and try to figure out how much can we actually allocate to the good traction channels that are working for us, depending on your business. Obviously, there's a lot of different marketing techniques and tactics that different industries use. But I hope that answered your question.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's just important for people to really understand, there are different things to look at, and obviously cash flow is one of them. Profit is, one of them too, but they're not the same. And I think people get confused a lot of times on, what that is. But obviously, cash is the most important to be able to continue to keep your business running, because you can look profitable, but you may not have any cash. And so definitely paying attention to cash flow is important. And I would love for you maybe to talk about KPIs. I know sometimes people hear KPIs, know it's, key performance indicators, but they don't even know like what to determine to have as a KPI to monitor. So how can they determine what metrics are essential for their business?
So it is really, again, industry specific. And how I like to start things off with those conversations are really around having conversations with department heads. So
Mhm.
the sales department, the marketing department, the operations department, and try to figure out what really matters to them. And a lot of times those conversations start with the headaches, what's going
Mhm.
wrong. And so you have to refocus what's going good, what's going well here. And so trying to understand those aspects of the individual and what goals they're trying to obtain. I mean, you have the goals of the CEO, the goals of the CFO, the goals of the COO, but there's goals of every department, but they're all
Mhm.
interconnected. And so trying to understand how to get everyone rowing in the same direction. And that's
Mhm.
really what's helpful when it comes to setting your North Star KPIs. Those are your biggest ones. What I mean by that is I like to think of things in, top of funnel, your marketing. How do we bring a lead in? That's
Mhm.
your marketing funnel, but you can lose them in each step along the way. So maybe a North Star KPI is, you know, how many leads were coming in. That
Mhm.
matters. How many qualified leads is probably a better KPI. How do
Mhm.
you define that? That depends on what you deem a qualified lead is, but effectively as they move through the funnel. So did we lose them at the copy? Did we lose them at the click in the form fields? Did we lose them on, our offering? Where in that marketing funnel did we lose them? Are other KPIs that can be tracked, but you might lose people in the granularity of the weeds around that. I mean, there's within one layer of the funnel for marketing, you could have literally 5, 6 different KPIs in just one of those layers, and really dig deep into the analytics around this consumer behavior. Where do they click? Why do they click? Where did we lose them, et cetera? How much time? There's a ton of different metrics there. So those are all KPIs, but maybe not the North Star that you're going to lose, or a conversation for the sales department. The sales department on their funnel, they're going, how many qualified leads came in? I don't care about where you lost them on your copy or the UI UX. Just give me a sense of how many qualified leads came in, and I will manage to my conversion rate and try to understand where we lose them in our sales process. Is it at the initial intro call? Is it the proposal stage? All those different stages. And so again, those KPIs, some of the granularity around that, marketing might not care about, ops might not care about, but the North Star ones everyone does. So how many qualified leads are coming in? What's our conversion rate on those? Pretty big, important ones. So that's kind of the way in which I will start to think about setting them. And ops, there's a lot of efficiencies there, but it's how you support. And then most importantly, like you're supporting the organization internally, but a lot of it's externally. How are we supporting? And so those KPIs, depending on what type of business you are, it might be product level, it might be service level, it might be experience level in terms of what that really means for your end consumer.
So how often should someone be looking at these metrics to determine like where they are? Should it be every week, every couple weeks, every month, every quarter? Like, what do you recommend in terms of, and different ones may have different, frequencies, obviously, but what is your recommendation for that?
It's a really good question. I think at the department head level, even a daily basis can be healthy. It's just kind of thinking of it as hygiene, what are we doing with regards to, keep our hygiene and keep our numbers tight? Weekly, I would say, is a minimum. And then how you report those to the team can, be different.
Right. And so obviously this is important information to have, right? So that you can analyze things. And then when you're looking at the numbers, and if something, is looking great, you're like, okay, we're on the right track. But if something is not where you're hoping to be based on your targets, you can make some adjustments, So do you want to talk on like how someone can use this information to make those strategic decisions to be able to continue to improve their company?
Yeah, it's a great question. And ultimately, I think what you look at, and speaking to having clean financials. So having clean books leads to the clean financials and gives you that historic roadmap of where we've been. Why that's so important is because it's guiding you of where you're going. So, and a true like old school map, you're kind of following along, like where do we come from? Are we on the right track? Looking around. Okay. Well, all of those aspects of what you're looking at along the way, and looking for those landmarks, and looking for the street signs, or the directions that you typically would use, not a Siri like talking to you, telling you turn right here. You don't get that. We don't have our Siri for the business. We are that, right? We're bringing that business intelligence to the table here. And again, it starts with those clean financials looking back. So a lot of it is then figuring out what's our range and what's our average and why. Was there seasonality in the business? Did that come into play in terms of why these are different from time to time? And so looking at it year over year, not necessarily month over month, is very important. And getting a sense of how the business performs during different times of the year. But again, benchmarking it against what those averages are or what it should look like during that time period, barring any anomalies, things that, were that move the needle one way or the other. And removing those from the financials can be important too when you're really looking and comparing performance. You don't want to hold someone accountable to something that was outside of their control, especially if it comes in anything's tied to performance with regards to bonus pay or anything of that nature. A lot of KPIs are tied to that. That can, impact the morale and something to think about. But we're really looking at the past and helping us understand where we should be at the future. And then if we're depending on where those more granular KPIs fall within, like, let's say a marketing funnel, we might want to talk about testing the copy, testing some of the UX in terms of the way in which people are navigating through, maybe let's just use a paid ad, for example, on one of the Meta platforms. That might look very different to someone, and how you'd want to manage moving forward with regard to your paid ad strategy. It's a lot of money you're putting out there. Let's make sure we get a good return on that ad spend. And if there's any levers we can pull in that funnel, let's do it. So as I talk to this, and I hope I answered that question and to enough specificity, but ultimately, this is the way that we kind of think as growth CFOs. We're really working with the sales marketing team, again, depending on industry, to dive a little deeper into what we think is going to move the needle in order to, make everyone happy. And we love seeing our teams make more profit, make more money so that they can pay their teams and take care of their families. And that's what's most important. That's what drives us and part of our mission statement.
Mm-hmm. So someone may not even know what like a good number really is. So let's say, they look at their, profit, or they look at the number of leads that they're getting in, qualified leads, and they might be thinking like those numbers are good, but maybe they're not so great really when you're comparing it to, others. So how do they even know if the numbers they have are reasonable, or they can be, significantly improved, or maybe they're doing great? Like, how do they know? You mentioned benchmarks, but how do they know where they even fall?
That's a great question. So a lot of the benchmarks that are out there, for example, let's just take ROAS. A 4 ROAS could be industry norm for a lot of different industries. And so what that means is you put $1 in, you get 4 back. And a lot of that is around the margin profile of trying to cover, what you're recouping your expenses and the team that is actually executing on the ads. So it sounds like, oh, I put 1 in, I get 4 back. Yes, but how much of that's going to cover not just the ad spend itself, but then the people who are creating the content, et cetera. And so there are industry norms, and depending on the business, I don't know what we're talking. Are we talking a landscaping business? Are we talking women's fashion boutique, e-commerce company? It really depends in terms of the industry specific. Similarly, if you're working, let's say on Wall Street and you're looking at the valuations of businesses, there's going to be certain industries that are valued differently. The multiple someone will pay on that cash flow because of various factors. And so it's tough to get a sense. It's tough to speak in generalities around kind of the specifics here. But in general, there's industry kind of norms that you could probably research and get a sense of, hey, are we in line or not? And in general, that's kind of what, when you look to go value a business on, the stock exchange, that's what you're going to be looking at. You're going to be looking at how do they compare to their peers in that industry? And should we be paying within this range of value, a premium for them, or should we be an average or below average? And that's all going to be contingent on how they perform at the different profit, the gross profit, operating profit, net profit. And then those various factors at like the marketing level, or what's going to kind of in sales level, are really going to determine a lot of that. How efficient are they with their use of capital? And so I know that's a little kind of a tangent to the specific question, but I'm giving context to, again, a big manufacturing with a lot of cost is going to be valued and have a different multiple than a SaaS business that gets infinite scale on putting more customers on their platform. They're just different business models. Same thing here with looking at it from an internal. That speaking from an external, how I would look at your business from the outside and associate or apply value to it. What would I pay to own these cash flows in the future? And how much cost and financial capital does it cost me to keep running that business? And so same thing with regards to internal. You're looking at it very industry specific and even sub-industry specific and saying, well, here's where we're at. And so we dig into that typically, like when we onboard clients, we will dig into all that information, make sure, that we're comparing apples to apples and then making adjustments accordingly. But at the end of the day, a lot of these small business owners, like that's just all too much. Just getting down to what are some of our KPIs, and people really they hire people like us because of accountability. Same with you. They hire people like you because of accountability. And that's really what they're paying for. They want to be held accountable. And so just getting your department heads to have a sense of what their KPI is and which is the North Star that matters. Just start there. Don't overcomplicate it. Just start there and then work backwards into creating kind of that weekly, monthly accountability and saying, here's what we thought we were going to do based on our forecast. Here's what we actually did. What happened? And then those learnings and insights along the way are going to tell you so much about how to navigate growing your business.
So what do you feel are the key differences between businesses that can scale successfully and those that struggle financially despite having good products or services?
That is a loaded question, but a really good one. Honestly, if I really had to diagnose what I think is the biggest issue in most of these companies is there's not a focus in on sales, business development. That's it. And if it's a marketing specific kind of customer D2C type company, then the marketing side of it. So whatever that sales component is to close the service offering or the product offering, that's always the issue. It's amazing to me how many people have wonderful businesses with great products and their customers are seemingly happy that get just very stagnant and growing their company on focusing on sales. And that is honestly the biggest difference. It doesn't matter if it's a manufacturing company, a landscaping business, an e-commerce business, a wholesaling company. It doesn't matter. That's the number one key thing is you have to really, really hone in on that sales and marketing funnel. And if you're not going to, you're going to run into problems.
So what are some of the key financial mistakes that you have seen entrepreneurs make, and what can you suggest to them to avoid those?
So the biggest one being what I just said, the sales and marketing. I think putting in place the KPIs and holding accountable. So building out a forecast. What that really means is for companies that want to grow, they want to know how much money they're putting into the company, how much of it's coming back. You need to track that. You need to understand what you're committing to grow the business and what amount of that gas in the car. Because now all of a sudden you're saying, hey, I wanted to just get the car home. Now I want to go to visit my brother who's, 300 miles further away. Different story. Okay. We're going longer and farther. Okay. So if that's the case, how much gas is that going to take? So we need to then plan accordingly and model out and say, hey, this is what it's going to take. And with those extra profits, the cash that's coming in, it's not just saying, hey, look how much more profits we're doing. I'm going to take those distributions out. No. We're allocating that cash back into the business. So profits might look high, but we're going to be taking and siphoning that cash back into growth. And so there's a huge difference between what earlier the question, profit and growth, on what that might look like. And so that is kind of the way in which that I try to help the clients understand of like, hey, here's where we're going, and then holding people accountable for that. Hey, we're going to invest all this money into the business. Well, let's make sure we're tracking to make sure it's actually working. And so that's kind of the biggest mistake I see people do is they want to grow and they make these decisions and they think we're just going to hire. Hiring your growth is one of the hardest things to do in business. J curving your company. So difficult. We went through that these past 2 years. And I get it. You know, it's the story, it's the conversation with the husband, the conversation with the wife, conversation with your partner that says, hey, I don't know if we're going to be able to afford this. Our margins are going to get cut in half. What are margins? Well, they figure it out real quick. Our cash flow is getting cut in half. Oh my God. And so effectively that's kind of, part of the conversation and story as you move forward is you want to make sure that it's a good use of capital. You're going to be hiring ahead. You're going to be spending marketing dollars ahead. So let's make sure that we're actually getting a good return on those. And so the biggest tip I can give is just track them. Say, this is what we're going to do, which is the forecast. Here's what we're planning to do. This is what we did. What happened? Why is there a difference? That's it. I think that's the biggest thing. It's that accountability that business owners need. And a lot of times they're just not going to hold themselves accountable. And so you're, being the financial adult in the room or having a financial adult in the room at the table that just says, that's great. It's a nice story, but here's the truth. And then, it is what it is. Sometimes that's why, the financial people get the bad rap because they're exposing or, shining the light on the truths. And it's not to finger point. The good companies that have culture is how do we learn from this? What's the takeaway? Let's improve. And when you have companies that have that type of culture, the amount of growth and happiness within the employees, the team, it just grows exponentially because then they feel like, man, they're really contributing and they're learning. And that's cool. That's fun to watch.
Right. I mean, the whole goal really, like I said, is get the financial information that you have and use it and make those adjustments as needed, to continue to have your company be successful and stick around. That's the sad thing is so many businesses, have started. And I know the statistic is around 30% of businesses are still running 10 years later, right? And so that's sad, right? And part of that is not having the cash, right? Not planning, not having capital. And so, like you're saying, this is so important to really be monitoring that, making sure that you have the cash needed to continue operations. So I'm so glad that you were talking about this today and giving people some of those metrics that they could be monitoring and what they can do to use that to strategically make those decisions and implement. So I appreciate that. So I know we're coming close to the end of time that we have together. So I wanted to ask, do you have an offer that you would like to extend to our listeners, or how can they contact you if they want more information?
Absolutely. So I think what's most important, and to your point, Candy, it's 80% of business owners' wealths are tied up into their companies, but they don't know what they're worth. And a lot of them, most of them think they're more valuable than they really are. So the offer is happy to do a valuation of what your business is worth. What we really pride ourselves on is being built to exit. So making sure that you understand what your company's worth and what the plan is to get it to where you want to exit, because 80% of your wealth is tied up in it. So let's make sure that you're able to monetize your life's work. And that's the best offer I could possibly help someone with.
Perfect. So where do they find that information?
You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Tom Dillon, CFA, or you can email me at tom@fracfinance.com. That's FRAK finance.com.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much, Tom, for being a guest on my show and sharing your expertise in this area. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure being here. You asked great questions, Candy.
Thank you. And to the listener, if you enjoyed today's topic and you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.